Okay, so I probably should have included the information I'm about to say in the first video, but I already uploaded that to YouTube, so it is what it is. Do you have an outline for what I want to say? I'm just not showing it to you guys, but I've got it over here. So I wanted to make 4 videos about my experience with queerness. I want to be specific here that I'm not really talking about anyone else's experience with queerness because while I've talked to a lot of people about it, I can't speak for it directly. I can only speak for myself and what I've experienced. And I'm not trying to make broad descriptions of what it means to be queer in general, because I think that's a really complicated conversation, and it's a conversation that deserves to have a lot of different voices in its discussion. And I'm only one voice, so I don't feel like I can really have that conversation. The only conversation I can have is about me and about what it means for me to exist as someone who is queer. And I want to make 4 videos about that, dealing with 4 different aspects of my relationship to being queer. And the first video, the one that came before this, was about sexual orientation and sort of how that seemed really simple at first and then seemed less simple later. And trust me, has not gotten any more simple over time. And this video I wanted to be about presentation and sort of what that means to me. Third video, I was thinking I would talk about gender, which is gonna kind of suck because sometimes it sucks to talk about gender when you're talking about yourself. It just is what it is. And fourth video, I wanted to talk about romance, which I think deserves its own separate space from sexual desire and sexual attraction, because there's other things that are at play with that. But anyway, so this is the video about presentation, and now that I've provided the outline that I should have provided in the first video, let's get into that. If anyone is watching this, I'm sorry for any confusion. If no one is watching this, then I'm not sorry for any confusion because I know what's going on. So, presentation. I did take my hair down for this video in comparison to the last one. I thought it might be useful to display a different presentation of mine for that conversation. I do want to be clear that I did not actually shave to achieve my aesthetic for this video. I had to shave for work anyway, and I never shave to achieve any aesthetic because I'm really bad at shaving. Been doing it for over 20 years, and I still am just terrible at it. I always cut myself. I cut myself this time around. You can probably see I'm bleeding a little bit. So unless the aesthetic that I'm going for is bleeding from my face, then shaving very rarely does anything for me. But my hair, is a big part of my presentation. It's a big part of how I feel about my presentation, and I'm going to be talking about it a lot over the course of this video. I wonder how many videos on YouTube are talking about hair. Probably a lot. There's like tutorials and shit, right? Okay. Anyway. So where I left off in the last video when I've been talking about my sexual orientation was that I was in undergrad in a small liberal arts environment, and I had an experience with another man who I was attracted to and had an intimate relationship with, who did not have a penis, and that sort of challenged me to think about some stuff. But now I want to talk about what I really wasn't thinking about during that time. Or rather, something that I was thinking about during that time, but wasn't really deconstructing. So during that time period in my life, when I was, 18, 19, 20 in undergrad, something that was really, really important to me about my presentation was that I was straight acting. I really, really cared about whether or not people perceived me as being straight acting. I want to be clear, I was openly gay at this point in time. I've been openly gay since I was 12. I'm super open about it, in fact. Most people who have any extended conversation with me pick up on the fact that I'm gay because I won't shut the fuck up about it. And that's always been true. But nonetheless, when I was younger and adolescent, it was really, really important that I act straight or that other people thought I acted straight. And I remember being really validated by hearing people say things like, the only thing that's gay about Matthew is his sexual orientation to men, or, Matthew doesn't really act gay. That was what I wanted to hear. That's what I was working so hard to portray. Which, in retrospect, is kind of dumb. And, like, I don't really think any of that was true, regardless of what I was saying or what other people were saying about me. Gayness is complicated. It affects a lot of shit. Certainly does for me. But at the time, the way that I was thinking about my gayness was as this very specific part of myself in this very specific little box. And it just sort of stayed there. And it existed, and I was happy that it existed, and it was a great, wonderful thing that I liked about myself, but it existed in a way that was very, very contained. Being gay would never impact my way of speaking or way of relating to men or women. Um, it was important to me that I be seen as just like any other guy. And I think for a lot of people in a lot of situations, there's good reason to want to be seen that way. There's a lot of times and places that it was true when I was growing up and that are still true in this country today where getting read as not straight can genuinely put your life in danger. Um, and so, to some degree, being straight acting can be part of staying safe. But I want to be clear that during this time period when I was so focused on being straight acting and in undergrad, that wasn't really the case for me. I was at a very, very liberal arts college named Sarah Lawrence. If you don't know what kind of place Sarah Lawrence is, feel free to look it up. It's super fucking liberal. It's filled with queers. We did not have majors. I'm not even going to get into what that meant because I got time and doesn't really relate to my queerness. So I wasn't really in an environment where I was giving myself any greater modicum of safety by being straight acting. Because once again, being straight acting wasn't communicating to anyone that I was straight. I was openly gay at the time. So it wasn't about being safe. And it wasn't about being treated a certain way, because I knew lots of femme guys on the Sarah Lawrence campus. I wasn't always very nice to a lot of femme guys on the Sarah Lawrence campus, which fully admit was super shitty, and any of them happen to watch that and remember me being not super nice, I'm really sorry. I was going through some shit, and also, I was a teenager, and teenagers are terrible fucking people. I'm sorry. There's no excuse for it. It was shitty. I remember having this really strong judgment about other gay men who weren't as straight acting as I was or wanted to be. I don't actually think I was ever all that straight acting. Once again, I love talking about how gay I am. I will not shut the fuck up about it. Literally ever. I'm still talking about it. And this isn't even the video about being gay. But I would have this very specific feeling of judging or being better than these men because the way I was acting by a complete stranger might be read as less gay than them. And that's just so absurd. They knew I was gay. I knew they were gay. Everyone around us knew that we were both gay. Who cares what a random stranger would think about the two of us? There's no random stranger in this situation. And something that I really regret about that time period is I think it actually cut me off from what could have been a lot of very meaningful relationships for me. Because, someone having a lisp or someone being femme or more femme than you really doesn't have any relevance to the kind of emotional or intimate connection that you can have with them, which is something I've learned later in life and wish I'd been able to follow up on at an earlier age. But there was another aspect of this being straight acting that came up for me, and that was my hair. And I know I said I was going to spend this whole video talking about my hair. Instead, I've talked about acting like a straight dude. Not the same thing. But so I always wanted to have long hair. My whole life, whenever I've pictured myself, it has been as someone who has long hair. Um, when I was younger and lived with my parents, I couldn't have long hair because at one point my mother said that if I grew my hair out long, people would think that we were too poor to send me to a barber, which was kind of a weird excuse, but sure, whatever. But once I got to undergraduate and wasn't living with my parents on 12 months of the year, I grew my hair out immediately. Um, and then, despite growing it out pretty immediately, I hid it. I, for the first, I think, 7 or 8 years that I had long hair, whenever I was around anyone else, I would wear it in this very specific way, pull it up extra high and extra tight to the back of my head, and I would tuck the end of my ponytail sort of into the crease in my hair, creating this like pseudo bun look. And really, I was doing it to hide how long my hair was. If I was sitting, in front of someone perfectly in this way, they might not even be able to tell that I had particularly long hair. Even if they did happen to catch the right angle to see my bun thing, how long it wasn't apparent. And I don't know how true it was for other people because I can't read other people's minds, but I had the perception that wearing my long hair in this way that I'm doing right now, made me look more masculine and more just like the other guys. And honestly, that was weird. And it's still weird in retrospect because I really wanted to have long hair. And I really love seeing myself with long hair. Even now, this look right now is, to be clear, this look doesn't make me feel like a woman. It makes me feel like myself. I really like this look. And I really like this look during that time period. I just couldn't show it to other people. Which was interesting and really, I think there's something really important about presentation that doesn't always get talked about because in a lot of leftist and queer circles, we always want to say, for good reason, that you can look any way you want and that's all valid. And I totally agree with that. I totally buy that. That's a great message to have for people. But sometimes controlling the way you look isn't actually about validating yourself. Sometimes sometimes it's another way to feel shitty about yourself. And honestly, during that whole time period when it was so important for me that people saw me as straight acting, I did feel really shitty about myself. Which is not to say that I don't feel shitty about myself now. It happens sometimes, but it happens a lot less. Um, I think that the way that we present ourselves, it comes from different places. And it can sometimes come from a place of not being comfortable with being different. And when it does come from that place, it's not really about presenting who you are to other people. It's about restricting your presentation so that you don't run the risk of realizing that you might not be just like all the other guys.